What's up, everyone? How are we all doing? I'm very glad to have everyone here. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. For starters, it's quite early here in Australia, just 8 a.m. But considering most of my viewers are either from the US or parts of Europe, I'm actually a day ahead. So I'm very glad to have everybody here. This is obviously the first live stream we're doing on the channel. And there's a few things I've planned. Number one, I was hoping we could probably start off with a little bit about myself. I have actually done a live stream previously, but it wasn't on my channel. If you have heard of Infidel Noodle, another quite popular ex-Muslim YouTuber, I did an interview with her, and I think we got a number of people there, and I was able to share my story and what was going on. So hopefully we can do that first before we head over to some of the other stuff that we've planned for today. And obviously there will be also a Q&A session. I thought we could make it a little bit more fun. I'll put on a fun video game or something like that while we do a Q&A. But apart from that, we'll go through a few things that I've selected that I think have essentially blown up in the news recently. So yeah, let's get this started. Hello Adrian, how are we? We will quickly transition to that. Yeah, funny enough, you know what? A lot of people thought with this mask that I was acting out on my videos, and then I was putting the voice over later. But as you can tell, there's a really nice mesh bit here where my voice actually goes through really well, and I had to look very hard to find the perfect mask. And there's a story behind the mask here as well. So I'll get to that in a bit. So I think for starters, you know, a lot of people who watch my channel, they don't really know too much about me. And I thought for the first live stream, why don't we actually talk about that a little bit? So I never envisioned myself to be a YouTuber to start off with, ever. I wouldn't have ever thought it would have come to this. However, I actually, obviously, I wasn't born in Australia. I was born on a tiny island called the Maldives. It is, funny enough, one of the few self-proclaimed 100% Islamic countries in the world. I believe some of the others might have been Yemen or Saudi Arabia, although I would say even those countries are probably around the 99 point something percent. In the Maldives, the laws are very interesting. So you have to be a Muslim to be a citizen. So if you aren't a Muslim, essentially, you lose your statehood, and therefore most people stay in the closet. They never come out. Obviously, there's a lot of social pressure, there's government pressure, and the Maldives, as you might know, is well known for its tourism. I can share some photos. Maldives. You know, there's this facade. Everybody wants to go on holidays or their honeymoons or whatnot. But the thing about the Maldives is all this is perfectly well and good. However, for locals, they live very differently to what tourists generally see online or on YouTube or wherever. They have made rules so that in the Maldives, on resorts, you can drink alcohol, you can have premarital or extramarital sex, you can do whatever you want. But you go to an island 10 minutes away and suddenly you're in a different world. You cannot drink, you cannot free mix, you can't do a lot of things. It's obviously a lot different to many countries in South Asia because it's it had been isolated for a very long time, and sailors in the past would essentially get stranded, and they essentially created their own ethnicity almost. However, it originally started off as a Buddhist country, but perhaps 1,000 years ago, Islamic traders came in and convinced the kings or sultans, later sultans, to execute all Buddhist monks and forcefully convert the entire country, and it had been Muslim since. So in my case, I actually never knew that Muslims could even leave the religion for a very long time growing up. However, luckily for me, I actually came across an ex-Muslim when I was quite young. And in trying to defend the religion of Islam, at such a young age, I slowly started to see the gaps, the inconsistencies, and sort of opened my mind as to why the religion was not real. And obviously, you could imagine for a very young person. Let me increase the volume a little bit. And you can imagine how, for a young person, how hard it would be that your whole worldview, your spiritual view, essentially got shattered within a couple of weeks. So, and apart from that, that was around the time when a lot more ex-Muslims or Christians and gay people, all these people sort of started to find each other online. And from that point onwards, I realized, wait a minute, there's a legitimate danger here for people, considering the fact that a few people had been attacked already because they figured they were going to be brave enough and come out openly. And that's when the Maldivian government, essentially many years ago, started what would effectively be extrajudicial death sentences for apostates. So because they have this image of tourism, and while the death penalty is official in the country, however, if they carry out the death sentence for an apostate, it doesn't look good. All of this, that suddenly the facade gets shattered. So what they decided to do was they would hire Islamist extremists to go out and kill apostates and even progressive Muslims, actually. Just get rid of them. And the police would never investigate. And once that started happening more than once, a number of times, and some people survived and they went into exile, at a very young age, I knew, if I stay, I'm living a double life, and I cannot do this. So, luckily for me, I ended up in Australia, and here I am, and I never thought I would be sharing this story or speaking out from a position of an apostate until potentially the Israel-Gaza conflict. And I think that's essentially what really shattered another facade for me, which was that Australia was isolated from everything that was going on in Europe, to an extent the US, but primarily Europe. And I realized, wait a minute, perhaps there were people harboring a lot of extremist views, and there were quite a number of them, like thousands. And the worst thing for me was I realized Australia is mostly progressive. I realized Australians did not understand, a lot of Australians, especially on the left side of the political aisle, did not understand Islam that well. So what we figured was, okay, let me put something out and essentially just explain Islam to anybody who's willing to watch. It's not a feminist religion, it's nothing like that, and that really put me into the limelight. And that's how it all started, and I'm glad it's really grown to what it is today, and I'm glad I've been able to connect with so many people from all around the world, and I've essentially been able to become a bit of a voice for people who've either not gotten that first-hand experience, and I've also, I guess, been able to speak out for a lot of people who are concerned about what they see around them. how the communities are changing, how governments are passing laws to essentially squash any criticism of either Islamic blasphemy or on mass immigration or cultural changes or cultural relativism, all these things. I've been very glad that I've been able to become a bit of a voice for a lot of people who have been able to try and talk about these things, but have been unable to. So hopefully that momentum will continue going. And hello, I hope everything's going well in Israel. One funny thing about starting this channel and actually speaking about these things is a lot of people assume that I work for Mossad or the CIA or I don't know. They throw out these accusations all the time. But apparently, if you ever speak out for Jews, not even just the ones in Israel, even if you speak out for Jews in Australia, suddenly, oh my goodness, you are an agent of Mossad. All right, excellent. I think we've got a number of people. Feel free to just ask me questions as I go along. I will try my best to answer them. I thought we might actually go to some news that we have seen recently to start off with, which I think a lot of you might not have actually heard of it. Some of you might have, but Australia unfortunately has been making the news as probably one of the more anti-Semitic places on earth right now, or at least in the developed Western world. And if you haven't seen this video before, I'll play a little bit. But essentially, what's happened was an Israeli TikToker, I think, he goes on Omegle or Chat Roulette. You know the websites where you meet random people, and I don't know what the chances are. He met two Australian nurses who work at the Bankstown hospital. And for those of you who may not know, that's in New South Wales, a state in Australia, the most populous state in Australia where Sydney is based. And it's actually been a hospital that's somewhat been in the news a little bit. And their activism towards pro-Palestine causes it's been no secret. But these two nurses, obviously they turned out to be not too smart. They went on camera, live, and they declared, especially this gentleman here, who he essentially declared that he would not treat Jews if they came to his hospital. And on top of that, he claimed that he had already killed some Jewish patients at the hospital. So when you make such a statement, when you throw the healthcare system, obviously everybody in a developed nation with a high social trust, that's the place that you just don't question generally. You trust your doctors and nurses to take care of you, whoever you are, your race, your ethnicity, your political views, your creed, how rich you are, how poor you are. Australia has somewhat of a universal healthcare, so it's expected of them. However, in this case, when nurses very publicly say that they're not going to treat someone because of their ethnicity/religion, and that they have actually gone ahead and killed people already for being from a particular religious group, that is why this video blew up. So I'm gonna go ahead and quickly play this for everybody. So if you haven't seen it, this might shock you. And I'm going to play the unedited clip, because a lot of people had said, oh, it's edited, the nurses were set up, but this one is completely unedited. So you can make up your mind. I'll just mute myself real quick while we play this.
You know what? Oh, shit.
How are you, man?
Good, how are you, my man?
Pretty good. Are you a nurse? A doctor?
I'm a doctor, my man.
A doctor? For what?
In hospital. What about you? Where you from?
I'm from Israel, from the Holy Land.
Right. You know what? I'm gonna be really honest with you.
All right.
I'm gonna be really honest with you. You actually got a really, really beautiful eyes.
Thank you,
But
man.
I'm so upset that you're Israeli. Like, eventually you're gonna get killed and you're gonna go to Jahannam, inshallah.
You
but like
think?
these pretty eyes, they should stay in this world for longer.
Why do you
Like
think?
I
Why
saw,
do you think I'm gonna get killed?
because inshallah one day God will, and
Maybe because I
you're gonna.
served in the IDF. That's why.
That's definitely the answer. Correct.
That's the
Yes.
reason because I served in the IDF. What's the problem with that? What's the issue with that?
Uh,
You killed innocent people.
Killed? I was protecting my country.
So you killed innocent people to protect your country.
Can you hear it now? It's just off coming
In
off
the
my
war,
mouth.
people die, as you know.
No.
They started the war.
no, 100.
Who started?
It's okay. Your son
Who started this war?
I heard you guys.
Who elected Hamas? Who elected Hamas?
It's Palestine's country, not your
Hello,
country.
how are you?
What's
your name?
No.
We're talking politely here. We're talking politely here.
One day.
One day.
Time will come and you will die.
Let me fix that up real quick. Just give me 2 seconds. I don't know if that might potentially work.
Are you the most
You
Oh, maybe not. Okay, I think it's unfortunately not working off my mic too well. Oh, okay. It was okay. Let me try.
spread hate, we spread positivity, we spread protection, we spread peace, and you spread death. How are you doctors? Wait. I have. Okay. Gotcha. I have a question though. Right, for sure. I have a question though. I have a question. Let's say an Israeli.
Oh, this is a
I
very
won't
good.
treat them. I'll kill them.
You'll kill them? So if an Israeli is in Australia and God forbid something happened to him and he comes to your hospital, would you kill him?
Okay. You have no idea how many Israelis had a dog came to this hospital and I finished Jahannam.
For real? For real? So if just Jewish people come here.
Now, the funniest part about this whole that nurse, and they're not doctors. Initially, everybody was claiming that they were doctors, but they were not doctors. They were nurses. One of them is actually a refugee from Afghanistan who only got his citizenship maybe, I believe it was 4 years ago. So, you know what? It really shocked me because, and apparently he came to Australia when he was around 12 or 13 years old. So you would expect someone who's seen how the Taliban were when they were really young and how Afghanistan essentially treats their people. You would expect them to come to Australia and integrate, grow to appreciate the culture, the high trust society, and at least the perceived successful multiculturalism. And you would think someone, especially in the position of a healthcare expert or nurse in this case, would not say anything like that or would not harbor these thoughts after such a long time. But unfortunately, this man here clearly, even after, I don't know how old he is, but certainly over 10 years since he moved to Australia, nothing's changed. He's clearly brought the views that the Taliban or people in Afghanistan hold towards non-Muslims, and in this case Jews, because they hold very specific views relating to Jews. And he still has those views in Australia and he's spreading them. And he's so confident, clearly, he's so confident that nothing would have happened to him if this had come out. And that's primarily because in Australia, the past 15 months, the government and whoever else, they had all been essentially making sure, because they don't want to lose certain seats where a lot of Muslims live, that they're not going to do too much. They're going to try and play both sides. The nurses union, the biggest union in Australia, they actually came out and they put out a statement. I'll try to find it, and you'll find it really funny. Oh, here we go. God, this is fantastic. Check this out. So they came out and they said they condemn all forms of racism, bigotry, and hatred, including acts of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Hold on just a minute. In this scenario, where was the Islamophobia? There were two nurses who were claiming that they would kill Jewish patients, and have actually done so already. Where did Islamophobia come from? But this isn't new to the Australian political sphere at the moment. This is the standard. They absolutely cannot condemn one side without somehow bringing in Islamophobia, when it doesn't even relate to the situation at all. It's just impossible. It's humanly impossible for these people. And I found that so funny when this happened. Well, fortunately, these two nurses have been suspended. I don't, from what I've read, they haven't been completely fired. Their licenses have just been suspended. And according to the Premier and the Health Minister of the state, they said these two nurses will never be able to practice in healthcare ever again. But I'm sure, considering Sydney's home to a large Muslim population, they would have childcare centres and aged care facilities and other, religious institutions that these two can work in almost immediately. So the woman in this video is, I believe, actually Palestinian, because apparently in the past 15 months, 70 of her family members have been killed in the conflict. So we've got potentially a daughter of refugees and an actual refugee talking like this. Which is why it sort of brings me back to that video I put out about how multiculturalism potentially has just completely failed in its current form in Australia. And yes, the gentleman has been apparently now hospitalized for he had a massive panic attack, and he's admitted, hopefully at a hospital where everybody's treated equally. I'm just waiting for Australian news to say, oh, the evil Jews have put this innocent nurse in in a hospital, because that is the sort of stuff they do over here, unfortunately. But luckily, and here's another article they found on him written some time ago, where they're talking about how the power of hope, help, and love on a journey from Afghanistan to Auburn. None of that none of that is true. How? If you harbour these type of views towards another religious group or ethnicity quite openly, and you're pretty proud to have them, so much so that you would share them openly. None of this is true. It's all complete left-wing buzzwords, or their, what do you call it, xenophilia, essentially. And yeah. So there have been a lot of videos that have since come out where on this issue, journalists have gone out onto the streets. What's the group unicorn? What's the because I think the auto mod might block out certain words, and I I'm very careful about saying certain words on YouTube as well, especially related to certain groups, because if you recall, many years ago when the Black Flag group was quite popular and when they had a lot of power in Iraq and Syria, they had recruitment videos on YouTube everywhere, and so they essentially went in and moderated that pretty hard. So I try not to even say the word. Oh, right. Oh, okay. No, I think someone already, Adrian, I think you already said Islamophobia. I can see that on the chat. Anyways, so a bunch of journalists actually went to Bankstown and they interviewed a bunch of people, and look at this gentleman here. And this gentleman here, he said, but what about all the children that are being killed by Jews? Where in Australia is that happening? Not happening anywhere. But he's imposing the war in Gaza. He's self-imposing that onto a country that is at least 2 continents away. And apparently that makes it okay for nurses in Australia to do so. Makes zero sense to me. But I guess this is a view that is held by quite a number of people. And another thing I truly believe is that those nurses felt that they could share this so openly and online, is that a large number of people in their community, especially in areas like Western Sydney, share the exact same values. So they haven't really been exposed to the fact that if I share these views to just your average Australian, that they would be appalled. They would be shocked that you're like this. But they have never had to experience that because everybody around them in these communities share the same values. Because it's essentially an enclave. So the second that it was exposed, it's now a national scandal. In fact, it's an international scandal. Unfortunately, Australia is once again on the in the news for anti-Semitism. If you recall, a large number of Australians, especially from this part of Sydney. Thanks, Gomi. Your question was, now that Islamophobia is mentioned, what are your thoughts on the term? Do you think the term is misused or that it should exist at all? You know what, like, I have two minds about this. Islamophobia as a term initially came from the Iranian regime back in the 80s, I believe. However, it's now been it was propaganda initially. I think about it this way. Is there a Christian phobia? Is there a Buddhist phobia? Is there a Hindu phobia? None of these words exist. It's not in mainstream lingo. But Islamophobia is mainstream. And a lot of the time I feel it has been conflated with legitimate hatred or racism towards, ethnic minorities who do practice Islam. That is where I think the difference is. But I think the word now has been essentially utilized in a really bad way, where the term is used to shut down any debate related to Islam as a religion. If someone goes and criticizes, say, Christianity or Buddhism, nobody is going to come out and shut down that debate by claiming, oh, hey, wait a minute, that's Christian phobia or that's Buddhist phobia. It doesn't happen. I mean, obviously there are a lot of atheists and agnostics, even famous YouTubers whose primary thing is just essentially criticizing Christianity. But they never get accused of Christian phobia, like if that's even a word. I don't think that's a word, or at least it's not in the mainstream. But Islamophobia is legitimately just, it's used to shut down debate. And I really don't like that it is used that way. And I think we need to somewhat change that so that instead of Islamophobia, there's legitimate racism and, discrimination that could happen. And I think those two need to be separated. I don't exactly know how we could even move that because it's not a topic that everybody on either side of the political aisle is willing to touch. The right wing, I don't believe, understand Islam really well, and the left, they sort of have adopted Islam into their fold because they don't understand it that well either, but at least they see it as, oh, it's a poor minority that needs to be supported and protected, even though Islam is essentially a fascist ideology. It's worse than any right-wing ideology they could think of within Western nations, at least. Perhaps a lot of them should actually travel to Islamic countries and see what they live like first, and not Dubai or any of those countries. Actual developing Muslim nations. But that's essentially what my thoughts are on Islamophobia, and I hope that answers your question. But it's not a term that I like at all. I really dislike hearing it. Primarily because it's almost 99% of the time it's misused and used to shut down debate. And on that, we're actually now coming to a stage where a lot of Western countries, we have Canada, we have the UK, I believe, and Australia as well, are passing laws based off the definition of Islamophobia that leans more towards that blasphemy side of things. Instead of it being actual discrimination. It's terrible because it's not a privilege that's given to any other religion. So I guess what could be done is just pushing back against it. I think a lot of politicians will be sort of scared to admit that they're slowly moving towards blasphemy laws, and I think that's where the push needs to be. And I think in a lot of my videos and that I try to push that point quite a bit because that's where you could get them. You can't get them in any other way when it comes to this issue, I think. All right, and on this issue, if you don't know who Pauline Hanson is, she was actually the politician who showed up to Parliament years ago wearing a full niqab. It's pretty funny. Made global news. Check it out. Yeah, she showed up, and this was years ago, and it once again made the news as well all over the world because she has been speaking out about this for a very, very long time, and obviously when the Bankstown nurses came out and said that, she's come out and said, look, I have been talking about this for a long time, and I've been called all those things, including Islamophobic, but some cultures absolutely are incapable of integrating. And the current opposition leader of Australia actually recently came out and said something rather interesting. He said that we need to rethink citizenship laws in the country because how could a person like this gentleman here get Australian citizenship? It is a point I also made on Twitter, now known as X, because I said to get citizenship you have to meet certain character tests. However, this gentleman clearly had not met them. So how was he eligible? He wasn't. He shouldn't have been a citizen. In fact, his permanent residency with his refugee status should have been looked at. Because when you invite refugees into a country, you would expect them to integrate, and you wouldn't expect them to come in and just completely destroy social cohesion in a country. But that is what is happening all around the West. You just invite everybody, anybody and everybody. You don't check who they are. You don't check what kind of values they hold or how it would change society if you import them in mass numbers. Just come on in. Nothing's going to change. And this is why we've got such mainstream views held by large communities in parts of places like Sydney. Where they feel so confident to say that. Now, moving on, there's a few other topics I wanted to mention as well. Just feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'll try to get to them as much as possible. You can also do super chats, and I'll almost certainly read them when they come up, and they'll be highlighted as well. The other one I wanted to talk about was Donald Trump and Gaza. This one I found very interesting because for an issue that's been ongoing for a while, this is the first time where America has somewhat sort of put their foot down. Obviously, I personally don't believe that he's going to start building a Trump hotel and golf resort where Gaza used to be. Certainly not. But what I do think would happen is he's trying to essentially force the Egyptians and Jordanians to step up and do something about it. From the videos and photos that I do see of Gaza at the moment, it's just completely all rubble. There's nothing left there. And unfortunately, I think if it's do you even call it a nation? An area of the world that relies almost entirely on foreign aid, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. And they also have a dedicated UN agency to do so. So in that case, I think with the US pulling out, the US aid and other countries also somewhat being a little bit cautious about funding Gaza again, it is now up to the Arab nations who've been talking about Palestine for God knows how long, and they have also been essentially, they've gone to war with Israel multiple times in the past on this issue. Now it is time to put your words into action, I think. And under Joe Biden, clearly, I can go into the bot and try to potentially lower the settings slightly, because I noticed certain longer sentences are getting blocked out for some reason. Just give me 2 seconds. I've lowered it slightly. And paragraph protection. Okay, I think longer messages should now work. I've lowered it. So, I think it was just blocking out messages that were a little bit too long, but hopefully that should have been fixed now. Give it a try again. Going back to Donald Trump, I do believe he's the sort of person who is so unpredictable, and he's the person that I believe the Arab nations somewhat would respect because, they respond to power and strength. Joe Biden, he faced the same issue that a lot of politicians elsewhere, like in Australia and the UK, faced because they had to win the support of the Muslim enclaves to stay in power. Unfortunately, that didn't work out very well for him. However, in the case of Donald Trump, he's someone who, he might not be liked very much by everybody, but at least he's, in a way, quite unpredictable, and he has a way of going ahead and just doing things. It's become a bit of a meme on X as well, but he just does things. And in this case, the Arab nations, I think, it's shaken them a little bit. They're like, wait a minute, where did that come from? Is the US actually going to take over? Unfortunately, I think to de-radicalize a nation, and a lot of people say a place like Palestine could not be de-radicalized, but that is not true. Certainly not based off history. If you think about World War II, there was Japan, there was Germany, and you could imagine how radicalized they were, especially when it came to the Japanese. They were so dedicated to the cause. there were some guys still fighting out the war like 10 or 20 years after it ended, hiding out in the jungles. So if they could be de-radicalized and somewhat given the opportunity to develop and become a little bit better, I believe Gaza, at least, or the Palestinians, absolutely can be de-radicalized, because it's no secret that a lot of people do get radical from a young age. I mean, it's all over the internet, and I think it needs a initiative from a country like the United States to really somewhat get all the Arab nations on board, and obviously most Arab nations, I don't believe, would want continuous wars against Israel, because there's really no benefit now, at least, for them. Because a lot of their countries are in ruin. Look at Syria. They're probably not recovering for many, many years. And thank you, Will. I really appreciate that. And thanks for your support and watching my videos. I think you almost certainly need someone like that to push them on that path where they can go and de-radicalize themselves. Because what is the other way? I have thought about this for the past year or so, and I can't think of any other way that you could somewhat bring this perpetual war to a halt, apart from people in Gaza realizing, wait a minute, Israel is never going to get defeated. Like, it's never going to become some other state. It's just a fantasy. It's never going to happen. So what we need to do is de-radicalize them and give them the opportunity to just carry on with life, instead of spending that life thinking, oh, we're just going to fight this war that we're going to lose, and we're going to try and have 8 babies all dedicated to this war. Like, what's the point of that? All those countries like Japan and Germany, after the war, yes, it was hard, but they had the miraculous comeback, essentially. And Japan is one of the biggest economies in the world, and they had that drive. And they were arguably probably even more radicalized than the Palestinians at the moment. So, all on the same level. So it's certainly possible. I just think by we, I mean Western nations, and especially the United States, instead of trying to play both sides like many countries have done, like Spain and Ireland and even Australia, that, has taken 3,000 people from Palestine, more than any other country combined from the developed world. Instead of playing that, trying to play two sides, how about they just go ahead and try to de-radicalize this country? It probably does end up with resettling people, especially women and children, the more vulnerable people, in countries like Egypt and Jordan, which I think is what they're trying to do. But I don't see any other end to this war. I mean, there are no security assurances. How do you live? Like, it's probably the most complicated geopolitical situation on the entire planet right now, apart from the Ukraine-Russia war, and there's no other way. And I really hope that Trump, a lot of people might not like him, and that's fine. However, I think his last term, he actually did quite a bit, especially when it came to meeting the North Koreans or the Russians and whoever. He was always, for a person people predicted would cause World War III, he did the opposite. So I hope he can continue this and actually bring something a little bit long term, like the Abraham Accords, which was, I thought, phenomenal on its part. Yeah, so I really hope that is the case. Rexzone, I did share a lot of that at the very start of the live. I don't know if you could potentially go back and watch that, but the live session would also be available for you to watch after the stream ends. I spoke quite a bit about that side of things. And hi, Powell, how's it going? Where are we checking in from? Now, another video that I thought might be fun to react to was the Fall of Islam video I did. That was I certainly didn't expect this video to blow up as much as it did, but at over 2.6 million views in the span of 2 months. Fantastic. And this video probably exposed my channel to a lot of people, and I'm glad that it did. Oh, England, excellent. I will get to England in a bit, because that's also been in the news quite a bit recently. Quite a lot of people have asked me since I put this video out whether I still believe that Islam might face a reformation, or essentially just people not really believing in it by the end of the 21st century. And I still believe that. I truly believe that. I think, especially going back to my story that I shared earlier, when I first became agnostic or atheist, at least at the start, the mere notion of apostasy was completely, it wasn't something I could even imagine. But the second the internet somewhat, and social media, Facebook back in the day, became more popular, that really changed everything. Suddenly you went from thinking, oh, there's maybe one or two apostates, to, hold on just a minute, there's like hundreds of us. And on top of that, there's even more progressive or cultural Muslims, as you might call them these days. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, it's not the facade, at least in Islamic communities, it's not really a thing anymore. And in the future, when things like AI come in, and there are emergent capabilities where healthcare and development become a lot better, especially in Islamic countries, and women are empowered and they no longer feel like they're the property of some old husband, I think that's when things really will start changing. I mean, it's not something we haven't seen before. So a lot of people are like, oh, but they have a lot of children, and that's true. And in the video, I actually addressed that. A lot of Muslims have a lot of children, especially in the underdeveloped areas of the world. But all the data shows that when they actually move over to Western countries, yeah, sure, it might be by one child or not, but eventually their birth rate actually falls around the same as a local. So it drops, because certainly it's not cheap to raise children in the West, and as women also get more educated, they leave behind a lot of values, especially if they were born in a country like Australia. That's when the birth rate starts dropping. And this is why I sort of also encourage in the video for governments not to stifle the ability to discuss topics like Islam with fake blasphemy laws, because that is how that momentum keeps up, and a lot of ex-Muslims and apostates can, or even progressive Muslims can really come out and say, hold on, we don't believe in this. And there's, at the moment, their community puts a lot of pressure on them, so they might not be able to come out that openly. But as generations go by, even that would essentially change, as there's less children and people adapt certain values. But that would only depend on whether we are able to ensure that the freedom of information is available to Muslims, especially in Western countries. When it comes to third world, developing nations, I believe humanity is also reaching that point where population somewhat stops growing, and the only countries where there will be an above replacement fertility rate would be actually in sub-Saharan Africa, in mostly Christian nations. And you can sort of see that trend at the moment as well. And it's not in Muslim countries. In fact, one of the lowest fertility rates predicted for the future include countries like Saudi Arabia, the centerpiece of Islam in the world, and the Maldives, funny enough. So Saudi Arabia, places like Qatar, the UAE, these are countries that have a lot of wealth, high GDP per capita, and they're trying to become these global countries with tourism and sports watching. So to do that, they can't keep up with this facade of, we want to. Oh, excellent! Thank you very much, Satiric Games. Your question was, as an Aussie Jew of Persian descent, you have no idea how important your voice is to us all. I'm part of the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran. One day we will be free, not in our lifetime, but I believe it. I actually agree. Iran is a very interesting case. I have seen charts where a lot of Iranians actually identify as non-religious these days. I'll try to find that chart so that people might be able to see. Non-religious. It's not here. Might have seen it on X. I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. This is the one. Yeah. So as you can see, quite a number of Iranians. Can everyone hear me properly? I think meow meow. I thought people could hear me properly before. I can raise it a little bit. As you can see, Satiric Games, you probably know already, a lot of people here are non-practicing, and I think that's fantastic news. Honestly, it's one of those things that I was talking about in my video, where people just, they've left the religion. Iran definitely executes people for leaving Islam, but are they able to execute every single person on this list? Because it seems like maybe, around 35% is Muslim. So are they going to execute 65% of their population? I highly doubt that. And I think this is a trend that we're certainly going to see in a lot of Islamic countries. And look, a lot of people make that mistake. Persians or Arabs or whatnot, but they're not. They have a very rich history, and unfortunately, I think Islam have really put them in a tricky spot that I truly believe that they'll come out of. And anecdotally, at least in Australia, I have not met, and you're an Aussie Jew of Persian descent, I have not met a single Iranian in Australia who was a practicing Muslim. Not a single one. They're all like either agnostic or atheist. And that's always stood out to me. And I think when it comes to the issue of ex-Muslims, quite a number of Muslims I've noticed would go out on I've even seen it on my comments. They're like, "Oh, you're Iranian, so it doesn't count." What does that mean? Like, of course it counts. Like, just because you're Iranian, does that mean you also can't leave the religion of Islam? It's nonsense. But I do agree with the Satiric Games. I truly believe that the regime is just on its last legs at the moment. Especially they've made a number of critical errors fighting with Israel recently, and I do think in the future that country would be quite different. And I hope it happens sometime within our lifetime, honestly. And I think it's entirely possible. So Holton, I have not really explored other religions. I have read about other religions a little bit. I've read about Christianity. I've read about Buddhism. But that's those two religions are really it. I think Christianity. I started reading up a little bit more about it after I visited the Vatican, and I on my tour on Dingo's tour of Italy, I think I was quite inspired by the Catholic architecture, all that history behind them, which is why I read up quite a bit, but I'm not going the way of apostate prophet just yet and converting to Christianity. I think when it comes to religion, I look beyond just what's in a particular religion. I look at, I guess, what would be the broader questions about why we're here and the ethics behind a God. So there's that. So when it comes to this video, I mean, I get comments all the time where Muslims are like, no, you know what, like their birth rates are so high, or the fastest growing religion in the world. And I hate that term, fastest growing religion in the world. I mean, it would be great, it would be fantastic if you're able to say you're the fastest growing religion in the world because of conversions, not because your women are uneducated and seen as essentially, like legitimately like cattle for breeding, where you have to pop out 8 kids and you can marry 4 wives and each one of them pops out 8 children and they're all living on like under $1 a day in abject poverty. Like, is that really something you want to be proud of? I certainly wouldn't think so. Eli, I thought Apostate Prophet did convert, or at least is exploring Christianity to an extent, because I saw him holding a cross, and I think he was talking about it a little bit, and I sort of assumed that he was looking into it because obviously after hanging out with David Wood for so long, I mean, what can you expect, right? But funny enough, I do watch a number of YouTubers who are Christian from the Speaker's Corner. There's this, I think he's Sri Lankan or Indian, Arul, or is his name Stephen, from a YouTube channel called Operation Stephen. I sometimes enjoy watching him debate Muslims in I think it's London. I find him so funny, like the way he says things. But the Apostate Prophet, I am quite thankful for him. Obviously, I had left the religion by the time I actually discovered him, but he was able to make me even more confident in the fact that not that Islam was as a religion untrue, but the fact that the morals, the ethics, all that, I certainly thought he made me significantly more confident in that fact. And I think Apostate Prophet probably has helped a lot of questioning Muslims or progressive Muslims completely leave the religion, which is why he's hated so much. So, well, Christina, I think to your point, the issue is there are unfortunately, well, I showed you this data here. This is from Iran. That shows the number of people who actually practice versus the number of people who don't. And Iran has the death penalty for apostasy. And as you can see, they're not executing 70% of their population. So what happens in Islamic communities especially is the fact that quite a number of people sort of self-regulate within their own communities. So even with laws, say in the West, unfortunately, they are unable to come out of the closet. I think it will take some time for people to be able to freely come out and just leave the religion. But if I look into the activity of apostasy or ex-Muslims on the internet from, say, 15 or 20 years ago, it's been exponential, like significantly bigger and more widespread. And you just meet people from so many different countries and you're just shocked. Oh, this guy's from Yemen or Iraq. Like, I didn't even think that was possible. Like, yeah, there's so many people like that. Obviously, you know, I have to wear a mask, and I live in Australia. Salman Momika, he was in Sweden, and they got rid of him. So even in countries like that, like Western countries, the fact that we are unable to do this openly because of that threat of violence, that's what somewhat stops it. But I am happy regardless if people have completely rejected the faith, even if they're in the closet, because at the end of the day, then their children, it impacts, and that momentum sort of keeps growing. Do you think MBS is secretly a Christian? I don't know if he's secretly a Christian, but I think he's secretly probably an atheist. Like even when I was really young, you would always hear about Saudi princes coming to visit the Maldives, and they would just bring their female companions who are paid, as they say, and they would just order tons of alcohol and book out entire resorts. So, yeah, these are the princes from a country like Saudi Arabia, and that's how they behave when they're away from their countries. So, yeah, in that regard, I certainly think that MBS might be an agnostic or an atheist. Yeah, Eli, you know what? In the future, I certainly don't plan on having this mask on, but we're working towards that. I think I had been thinking about it for a while, but when Salman Momika got killed, I was like, hold on, maybe I should just give it a little bit longer, because who knows what kind of people are out there. And on top of that, as long as I think we live in a very heated moment at the moment. So especially with the Israel-Palestine conflict, I think everything's quite heated. Especially these two cultures are clashing pretty significantly. So while that's happening, I think the threat of extremism is at a much higher level, even in Australia. So at the moment, I believe our secret service, or our version of the CIA, have come out and said the biggest threat of religious extremism is actually Islamic extremism, and they have raised the terrorism threat level. So, yeah, for my own safety, for now, I think at least until that all dies down, I'll keep this mask on. Yeah, and we'll see how it goes in the future, because mask is cool and all, but I feel like sometimes, especially in the videos and all, like you can't see me express myself that well if you have to just rely on sort of how I move my hands around or my eyebrows, and I'm not that big of a fan of that. Hey Bubbles, how are you? Bubbles is a very active member of the channel's Discord, and Chris. Yeah. You know what? Like, I think I'll be fine. I think I'll be able to blend in very, very easily. Because parts of my name are still Arabic, so if I don't tell a Muslim, they would assume I'm one of them. So I can easily blend in. And funny enough, that's how I have actually realized that a lot of Muslims in Australia. Your mum's Wi-Fi. Are you in here? I didn't see your name. Are you using a different name? I would have given you a shout out otherwise. Yeah, some of my Discord members, just giving them a shout out. And I can't really, obviously I don't know Hebrew, so I can't say your name, but to the viewer who said you're more than welcome to visit Israel. Yeah, one day I'd definitely love to visit and see what it's all about. And obviously there's a lot of history, especially when it comes to the Abrahamic religions. Oren, yes. That's what I'm quite interested in, just seeing, the birthplace of Christianity, Judaism, and just, I quite enjoy the historical aspect of it. And yeah, maybe, you know what, like even potentially get together a few Israelis who watch my channel and yeah, just have a discussion group or something. I think that would be quite fun and interesting. Maybe we can even put something like that up on the channel. But yeah, we'll work towards that, I think. And at the moment, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I'll probably have to wait until the situation cools down a little bit before I head over, I think. What was it? And the e-safety commissioner. Okay, that's a very interesting topic. I actually made a video on my channel that's available for members at the moment. So, for those of you who don't know, Australia has a very, very powerful commission that somewhat acts like the Ministry of Truth. Thank you very much, Mickey Poo, for the super chat. I really, really appreciate that. So, the e-safety commissioner is someone who actually has the ability to go in and block what you see on the internet for all Australians, including, you know, and perhaps the big one was, if you're not aware, Murray Emmanuel, he got this gentleman. You might know him. He unfortunately got attacked by a Muslim, and the knife actually fell to open, which is probably why he survived. But as you can see, it injured his eye. When this video came out, because it was on a live stream, it was in a live lecture, the E-Safety Commissioner of Australia decided to block the video from being viewed, not just in Australia, but globally. And that's when Elon Musk said, "No, we're not going to do that. They've already geo-blocked it in Australia, but we're not gonna act as the arbiters of truth for jurisdictions around the world where Australia doesn't have that power." And that went to court, and unfortunately, fortunately, I think the E-Safety Commissioner lost. And that's really when Australians, I guess, became aware that there's a body in government that has the ability to block anything they want in Australia that they deem you should not be able to see. And in this case, I found it very interesting because it was an instance of a Muslim attacking an Orthodox Christian bishop on a live stream, and they did not want you to be able to see that. And I found that very, very interesting because there were lots of news channels that had actually broadcasted it on TV, but obviously the internet is where most people would see it, and they did not want you to see it. So I don't know if Australians still can't see it. When I put out a video ages ago on it, I think I had to actually clip it out a little bit, obviously to adhere to YouTube guidelines, but also to make sure that the E-Safety Commissioner potentially could not impose that power and take it down, because they do have that crazy power. Do Australians enjoy being ruled like this? No, not at all. I mean, it's crazy that we have a person that is able to censor anything they want on the internet, and they'll use words like we've discussed already, Islamophobia. They'll use that as an excuse to block that out. So I think luckily for us, Elon Musk really took the fight to them, and I think that really turned the tide around. I think I'm also very careful about how I present certain things on my YouTube channel, because I've already been censored by one of the richest people in Australia for my first video, and they use stupid laws like that to do so, and that was that video was about a loophole in the gambling industry, and I did an investigation on that, put that out. The person who became a billionaire because of it, they hated that, and yeah, got YouTube to geo-block that from Australia. And I'm very aware that certain things that I put up on the internet, on YouTube, there is a body in the Australian government that has the ability to take that down or prevent it from being seen, at least in Australia, where a lot of my viewers live. Satiric games. We actually discussed that in detail at the start. I don't know if you caught any of that, but in case you wanted to go back, you can either wait until the end of the stream and just sort of rewind and watch that again. But yes, I'm very well aware of the Bankstown, not Blacktown, Bankstown nurses. We went through that. The nurses, one of whom was an Afghan refugee, and the other one who is Palestinian, born to potentially Palestinian refugees here as well. So, sort of shows how multiculturalism really has failed, especially in a country like Australia. Make Albanese go away. Oh God, yes. I mean, we can talk about Australia a little bit in that regard, and I can tie in England as well. So why has Australia become one of the anti-Semitic hotspots in the Western world, and similar in the UK, for example? Because we have electoral seats in the country where a lot of Muslims live, and they're under threat of going to independent Muslim candidates instead of the Labor Party that currently hold them. And Australia saw what happened in the UK, where instead of those seats going to Labor, they went to Muslim independents. So now they're scared. They're like, oh crap. Like, we can't allow the exact same thing to happen in Australia as well. So we've got to pander. We've got to pander as much as possible, and we're not going to choose sides. We're just sort of going to say, oh, that's too bad what's happening to Jews in Australia, but we also kind of hate Israel. We love Palestine. And, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in Australia. A bunch of people went to the Opera House right after October 7 and had those chants that went around the world, essentially. But, hold on, there's also a lot of Islamophobia. Like, they're trying to play both sides, and that is so that they don't lose those seats. And the UK, unfortunately, they're maybe one election ahead of us. They're probably a lot worse in a lot of areas. Like, if you think about the grooming gangs issue, for example, you think about just areas in parts of the UK that are completely just have changed to this, I don't know, a mini Pakistan almost, and where more British Muslims have now joined that group with a black flag in the Middle East than the British Armed Forces. That's a big problem, and that says a lot about how multiculturalism has worked out for a developed nation like the UK. And unfortunately, that's going to take a while to correct. And I think a lot of European countries will be forced to do so. You slowly see the tide turning, and I think in the future we'll see we'll see it change quite significantly. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the election in Germany looks like, and whether the alternative for Germany gets any bit of power. Would help for Australian politics, for Labor. Eli, I have thought about that quite a bit. I did wonder, perhaps, is it a strategy to allow Labor to lose them to independents? Okay, just hear me out, and then see how those independents behave. Like, what are they representing? Who are they connected to? Who are they funding? And just put it all out there. And I think that would expose to a lot of Australians, perhaps, who've been a little bit too scared to pick a side or decided not to pay too much attention. I think that has a lot of value behind it. At the same time, losing, a couple of seats to such independence. Also, because we're looking at a very tightly contested federal election next. So if the opposition cannot win a majority government, that means suddenly those independents do have quite significant power, even though there might be just a handful of them. That is my concern. So there's pros and cons, but I think it's a strategic move certainly to allow them to win, but I think Labor are going to try really hard, and they're going to pour in millions of dollars to try and win that. I think we're probably looking at a Labor minority government, and we're probably also looking at those independents holding, if they do win, quite a significant amount of power to sway Australia, in the way they vote on the Israel-Palestine issue on the world stage, at least. It would be very hard for the Liberals to win a majority government. And I don't know if I'm that pleased with them as Ada to preference them. But yeah, let's see how it turns out. I certainly hope. I certainly hope the Australian election does not reach that level where we have ended up giving jihadis a lot of power in Parliament. I just want to avoid that. Maybe the one might strategically work, but more than one, oh God, goodness, that would be insane. Genuinely, it would be a scary time for everybody involved. We're gonna try and go into a Q&A session soon. So I'll just try to answer as many questions as possible, and then we'll sort of end it from there. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask me, feel free to ask. Also, if you have anything like links to Twitter or anything like that you would like me to discuss, also drop that in the chat and I'll have a look at that as well. We'll just transition that to that page there. Mickey Poo. That's an interesting question. So Israeli communities generally live very close together, I guess. And I believe there's around 120 or 150,000 of them, like Lily J. I think generally there have been Australia has been a very safe country for them. Genuinely, I still believe that despite all of that's happened in the past 15 months, Australia has had a Jewish treasurer. Australia has had multiple Jewish people who've held prominent positions in government and such, and I think they were able to do that because it is a safe country. And I think overall Australia is a safe country for anybody. Genuinely. All I would ask of anybody moving to Australia would be to, like this probably applies to one demographic more than anybody else, but to leave certain views behind. Like what you saw with those Bankstown nurses. They clearly brought those views to Australia when they moved, and that's just not on. It's not something that would fly in a country like this. It's not something that's shared. It's not an opinion shared by the majority of people in Australia. So it was rejected. It was universally rejected by every single person on the political aisle, and therefore I do think it's still a safe country for Jews or Israelis, despite that video. Certainly, Western Sydney. Avoid that area. Avoid that area so that you know, you don't run into those issues. I think places like Victoria might be a lot better. It has a significantly larger Jewish population. What do you think about the UK becoming the United Kingdom of Islam, and where do you see the EU in 10 years? That's quite the interesting question. I mean, I have shared my opinion on the UK a number of times. The UK, I think, is a sad story more than anything else, because you hate to see a country like that go down such a path, and I think a lot of people can understand where I'm coming from. I think, especially with the whole grooming gang scandal, and that had been happening for decades, you can see how culture was starting to change, where people were too afraid to say, hold on, there's a pattern that we can establish here. This isn't, as they like to label it, an Asian problem. Well, Asians can be a lot of people. Asians can be people of Chinese background, Koreans, or even if you look at South Asia, like Asian could be Sri Lankans or Maldivian like me. But that's not what happened. In this case, it was specifically one nationality, one religion that was causing this issue, and they hid it because they thought it was racist to bring it up or even investigate it. And there were quite a number of instances where victim blaming was okay in this instance because of who the perpetrators were. I think the UK, obviously, under the Tories, made a lot of strategic errors, and they allowed the significant immigration to happen by design, as Keir Starmer actually came out and said. And it's true, it was all by design. And if you wanted to integrate people into a nation, you essentially have to do it through... It takes time. You don't expect someone who might harbour the worst type of views. If you just take them from one country to the next, they would just suddenly assimilate and integrate within a year. It simply doesn't happen. And now we're at a point where, say you take somebody from Pakistan and you bring them over to the UK. They could just go and stay in an enclave where everybody speaks Urdu, like they do in Pakistan, and they practice the same religion, they wear the same type of clothes, and you're sort of isolated from broader British society because you're in that enclave. All the shops remind you of home, you're sending money home, you work for a business that's culturally aligned and probably owned by a person from the same country. So there's no incentive to integrate or assimilate. And when those numbers, when you have no control over it, and when you believe in cultural relativism incorrectly, there's no chance. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened in the UK. Those numbers just grew too much. And this is why in a lot of my videos, when it comes especially to the whole thing about Islam and the West, it all comes down to immigration. Like, it really does. Like, before the integration thing happens, you have to control numbers. Like, and perhaps to America's credit, this is why it doesn't happen as much there, because I guess their immigration primarily happens from South America, where Christian Catholics can come in and integrate much better, and yeah, that's how it works, and I think that's the bad thing about the UK at the moment. In terms of where do I see it in the next 10 years, in fact, I actually see it in the opposite way. I see a lot of countries sort of where the pendulum swings back, and I see a right-wing resurgence that talks a little bit more about that brings in some changes to migration and finally admits that assimilation or multiculturalism to in the way it is practiced now is not working, and there needs to be a change. I think that's where it would end up. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching my videos. Some other ones started to have my doubts about Islam during Ramadan. Oh my goodness, that's pretty funny actually. I mean, if you live in a Muslim country, like, do you hide biscuits under your bed during Ramadan or what? Because I know a number of people who do that. And Pal, no, I did not make these myself. I just thought it fit into the cyberpunk aesthetic quite a bit. It's just through Streamlabs. I thought I might just make this look a little bit nicer. Obviously my first one, so I was completely predicting some mishaps here and there, but I think it's worked out. Aesthetically pleasing, I think. And Christina, yeah. Well, anti-Semitism, unfortunately, it's growing in. You know what? It's always existed. Let's be clear about that. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is built into Islam, and yeah, it's not something you can get rid of very easily. I mean, even in the Quran, it says not to take Jews and Christians as your allies, or not to be friends with them, or the day of judgment does not come until all the Jews have been eliminated. So yeah, this is straight from the scripture, and if people truly believe that this is the word of God and the messenger of God, why would multicultural ethics in Australia, the UK, or parts of Europe, how would that override that? It won't. It's built in. Regardless of what pro-Palestine lefties say or not, anti-Semitism is just built into Islam. It's never going away until the religion starts seeing significant reform. Not happening. Do I think Canada is going to swing too? I'm excited to see the election, actually. I mean, Justin Trudeau has been powerful, 10 years now, and the country's not looking that great. I actually did a video on Canada a long time ago, almost a year ago now. And I think that was primarily on the immigration and housing issue they face. You know, a lot of people like to think I talk about Islam a lot, but I do quite enjoy talking about the economics and the cultural issues a lot as well, especially the economies of these Western nations. And I think, you know, like in the future, I think because of this issue, you're probably going to see the Conservatives win, but let's see. Justin Trudeau resigned so that his party probably stands a chance, but I don't know if it's too late for them. But the numbers, yeah, like to hit a record number, to hit a record in your population increase, and then beat that record 1 year later by 1 million or so. That's just ridiculous. I mean, how's that even possible? And a lot of the issues that we see in Canada, we see in Australia as well. Also, fake students, fake colleges, visa hopping, and essentially an immigration system that's designed to extract as much wealth out of fake students who ironically pay for their courses and earn all their money through working in their host nations. So it's not really an export either. Okay. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. My family's from Indonesia. It's awesome, man. Or woman. I was in Bali not too long ago. Love that place. And I love Indonesian food. Ironically, the largest Muslim population in the world. This is an interesting question. What were your views on Jews before becoming an ex-Muslim? Well, a lot of Muslims won't say this, but most Muslims would have never met a Jew in real life. So you rely on what you're taught in school and your Islamic studies, and yeah, we were taught all the anti-Semitic stuff that you could conjure up through the Islamic doctrine about Jews. Everything I just said before, we were taught that. And as a child, not just me, everybody took that as fact. And I had never even met a Jew before, which is pretty shocking, isn't it? And I think once I opened my horizons, and it's not just Jews, it's Christians, it's gay people, it's women. All these demographics are not seen very positively in Islam. So yeah, those were my views as a child, but certainly I'm glad that I started seeing the holes and the ethical issues in Islam in my early teens, and I was able to reject it completely. And yeah, now, I have Jewish friends, I've met a lot of Jews, I've met all types of people, and it's so clear to me. All that they teach you in Islamic schools and that, if only they could just go and speak to someone in real life, and they'll see they're not some evil monster that you're taught in school that they are. So that's my answer. Hope that answers your question. And Connor, thanks for that. Yeah, I really enjoy making them. Actually, the one that I'm working on is more economics based. So that one will be good. So I'm hoping I could do a lot more videos like that as well, because the channel hasn't been purely focused on Islam, talk about a lot more than that. So yeah, we just want to expand our horizons on that. Yeah, I mean, Pranav, I certainly think so. I think people who are born in a country like, say, the United States, and they're Muslim, they're more likely to be able to integrate a little bit better, I would say. But we have seen instances in the UK, for example, where they haven't been able to assimilate or integrate, so they're sort of just marginalized, and they become even more extreme because that's where they find their identity. So they don't relate to either being British or being, say, Pakistani. So they just become an extremist Islamist. So there are cases certainly like that, and I'm sure a lot of my viewers have heard of that phenomenon before. But I think generally, if you're born in the West, you're able to integrate easier because that's what you see around them. Obviously, there needs to be certain criteria, like not sticking to just your enclave and being able to hang around, I guess, people from other religions and, say, broader society. And I think that would really help. Yeah, certainly. Bali is the least Muslim part of Indonesia. I visited some temples and that, and I did see, tons of bogans, Bubbles, tons of them. God, certain hotels or resorts in Bali, you wouldn't think you've left Australia unless you notice the staff. It's like, crap, everybody here is Australian. And bogan too, no, I understand you wouldn't bite. I've heard that as well. The nightclub shooter was actually a closeted gay person, or openly gay. Do you think Australians are starting to wake up to the threat of Islam? This is a tough question. I would say yes and no. I think the left side certainly is having a bit of trouble coming to terms with it. I think everybody else, from the centre to the right, certainly we're seeing that a lot more. If you have gone on social media recently, you would see a lot of people you would have never thought would criticize Islam in that way. They are making those criticisms, and I quite appreciate the fact that they are. Unfortunately, one of the videos that I made on that issue about about Islamic extremism in Australia growing, especially after the October 7 attacks, that got demonetized, and the reach got artificially cut down by YouTube. And yeah, it was for the dumbest reason, because I actually showed one of the graffiti that was put on a synagogue or a Jewish school, and I put that in my video, and they said I was spreading hate speech. But YouTube can be really weird like that. But if you scroll down, I put in an in-depth analysis of that, and I think because the reach got cut down, I'll probably make a follow-up to that, especially based off the Bankstown nurse issue. But yeah, that's upcoming. From country Victoria. Oh, excellent. So I guess I have people from all over really watching. Bubbles, I don't think I would have expected a question to be what my opinion is on bogans. And who do you think is more close-minded? Definitely not bogans. I think I know a lot of people who are bogan, and they're fine. Yeah, clearly a lot of people, if they live in far north Queensland, maybe they haven't ever met someone who doesn't look like them, so they might harbour some issues. But certainly the ones I meet out here, they're fine. If you didn't speak on that issue, what content would you make? I think I would certainly. I quite enjoy issues on culture, because culture, I believe, influences politics quite a bit. So whether it's popular culture or looking into things like what I said, that video that got geo-blocked in Australia, where I investigated this gambling loophole, things like that. I would have loved to do that, and I would still be continuing to do them. I think I certainly want to expand. I don't want to be a keyhole into just being, an ex-Muslim YouTuber, because I think a lot of Muslims or questioning Muslims actually go to ex-Muslim YouTube to get help in leaving the religion. I certainly don't think my channel is for that purpose. My primary goal is to essentially find solutions, I guess, to issues that we have, whether it be immigration, the economy, politics, and obviously issues around religion. So that's my idea. Yeah, I obviously wasn't. I was way too young for Cronulla, so. But yeah, it's and Australia, the Australian version of what happened in the UK, unfortunately. Do I have an opinion on the practice of taqiyya? You know what, it is true that a lot of Muslims were never taught taqiyya, and that's certainly true. When I was growing up, what we were taught was I can't ever recall studying taqiyya as a concept in itself, but what we were told was you cannot lie unless it is in defense of the religion or yourself. So I guess, that is the definition of taqiyya, isn't it? That's what, but we were never taught it as a concept. We were just told, when it comes to lying, you just can't lie unless you're defending your religion. So that's what we were taught, essentially. But I think it's something that is practiced widely without people even knowing about the concept? Absolutely. I think the way Muslims might speak to an ex-Muslim, or Muslims might speak to other Muslims, is very different to the way Muslims speak to say, Western, white people. I've noticed it. Like, when it comes to the Westerners, they will be like, oh, but the hijab is a choice or whatever. But when they're within their community, suddenly it's no longer a choice. You better wear that or you're going to face a certain type of punishment in the afterlife, all that. So that aspect is widespread. And I think it's great that a lot of ex-Muslim and apostate and even, like a lot of Christian YouTubers are able to call that out. I really appreciate that. This is the guy that I was speaking about. I'll actually bring that up. Operations. Yeah, I don't know who this guy is, but I just found him really interesting. I'll mute that. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this guy before, but I found him very interesting. I think he's a Christian, but I have been quite impressed by his knowledge of Islam. He just goes out and debates them. And he has this really thick accent, which I find so funny when he speaks to them. But once again, it's all in the UK. And I do think he's a brave man because he steps into a crowd of what seems like people who aren't that friendly. What other questions? Yeah, absolutely, Garuda. Like, because the community self-regulates, doesn't it? So even if you don't have an Islamic family, like if your entire community around you is Muslim, or if you say you're an ex-Muslim, number one, they'll deny that you were ever Muslim. Number two, they'll be like, the second you say why you left Islam, they'll treat it as a threat to them, and suddenly, you're at risk of some sort of violence, and that I find very, very unfortunate. Which speaks volumes as to why it's, I have a mask on and a lot of Muslims are still in the closet. Indian Christian Crusader. Oh man, that is a funny description. But I do find him really, really funny. He's the way he carries himself and the way he just questions people, as you can see. I sometimes watch him. He's one of the... Like, I generally don't like watching a lot of these debates because I've just seen so many of them. But this guy I enjoy because I think there's a certain comedic side. I don't think he knows. He's aware that people might find him funny, but I certainly do. Oh, look. Where is that? In Europe? No, I was aware of that. Man, what happened in Germany? That's unfortunate. Yeah. Would I own stuff for self-defense? Well, I mean, I know a little bit of martial arts now. I do that regularly. But, yeah, I'm sorry, the kid, I muted him because I was speaking and they just shout a lot. And I was like, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. In Australia, for self-defense, you can't really own firearms or anything like that. So the best self-defense would be to stay anonymous for a while. But like I said, in the future, I'll look to switching that up. I'll have to just wait until the Israel-Palestine conflict cools down a little bit as well, because that's just heated up and brought out the worst people in the country, terror cells and that sort of thing. They've brought them out. So, yeah, it's best to stay like this, at least for the time being, I think. Yeah, Rob, it is. I think if you have seen the Wolf of Wall Street, I think this is a point I've brought up in my interview with Infidel Noodle. there's a scene where Leonardo DiCaprio is, he's sitting across a Swiss banker, and they're not really speaking, or they're saying certain things, but they're not meaning it. And then you see how they're actually communicating with just their minds, and they know what each other's thinking exactly. And that is sometimes the way I feel when I communicate with Muslims. I'm like, you're never going to admit what you're thinking, which I know that you're thinking, and you know that I know that you're thinking it. You're never going to admit it to, Western-born people, non-Muslims. You're never going to do it, because suddenly that paints Islam in a really, really bad light. So we need to continue this facade that you have on. And that's certainly something I've noticed for a long time. Great movie, by the way, The Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. All right, look, we're almost coming to 2 hours of the live stream. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for joining. I mean, in the future, I'll also try to react to as many things as possible. You can certainly send me things to react to as well for live streams. I'll try to do as many of these as possible. Hopefully on Sundays Australia time. And yeah, it just adds, like, I guess most of you just see me in my videos for a short period of time, just for like 3 seconds or so here and there. But I appreciate being able to connect with the people who actually watch my videos and connect on a more personal level, because obviously there is a person behind the channel. A lot of people think that I am an AI or not a real person, so at least even this this helps in crushing those claims as well, because I think it's just a cope from a lot of Muslims on my channel that none of it is real. And I think having that personal experience that I have really, really has a big impact, I think, on the conversation. So yeah, let them know, and let them know to just either tag me on X or send me an email or something like that, and I'll be happy to look into it. Hopefully on one of these live streams, actually. Yeah, well, thanks everyone for joining. I think we might end it for today. Hopefully you'll see another video from me next week, and I'll also do a live stream again. Hopefully make it a regular thing, and yeah, connect with everybody, like I said. And yeah, we'll have fun. Maybe I guess I didn't have time to launch up a session of Red Dead Redemption 2 today during the Q&A, but hopefully next time, and we'll have a little bit of fun there as well. All right, excellent. Thanks everyone for coming, and I will end it there.